so much. Oh God. Okay. I overcomplicated famous brands.
In my last video, I simplified famous pouch designs, and while some people liked it, a lot of others got quite upset. So to appease the masses, I'll be making minimal products more complex to bring back some of their personality. And first up, we have Pringles. Now, I think I speak for everyone when I say a little bit of us died when Pringles went from this cute little guy to an egg with a mustache. But I'm going to fix this grave injustice and mold Mr. Pringle into a new form even better than his original. And you'll notice I'm redesigning the grab and go version because I really just didn't want to have to make this video in portrait mode. Okay, so let's just start off with the logo. I'm just going to come in here and separate the text from the head because I want to give our boy something he's never had before, a body. Now, I don't know about you guys, but anytime I looked at the original logo, I always imagined him as a little showman, you know, kind of like the ringleader in a circus. So let me just get some reference here. Now, if this isn't clearly a trained professional, I don't know what is. So let me just drop this in here, get rid of all these posers, then just rearrange his body here. So basically, I'm just going to do an illustration for all of this. I just want to set up a base for reference first. Now, I'm not sure a whip is an appropriate item for him, so maybe a cane would work a bit better. Now, basically, everybody on the internet agrees that Mr. Pringle and the Monopoly guy are twins. And since we all know twins like sharing, I'm just going to borrow his arm and top hat here to place right there. Let me get it so he doesn't have two right arms. I guess this bow tie logo should be a tad bigger, so it can kind of act as a natural cutoff to his body. And maybe I can scooch everything down just a bit to get it all more centered. And now I can get to illustrating. So basically how this went down was I kept the same head shape and eyes, but added a little more detail to the stash. I brought back his iconic hair, which, be honest, you spent your entire life thinking these were eyebrows instead of a rat hairdo, didn't you? Well, then I made the suit similar to the reference, spent forever trying to get these hands right, and finished it off with his iconic bow tie. Let's just stick with the original white hair and brown hair, and the rest basically just matches the reference colors. Now I want to render him in a similar style, you know, like other mascots, think like Tony the Tiger or Chester Cheetah, and there's a few simple steps to do that. First, we just need to lay down a little shading to show that our light source is coming from the upper right corner. And just a little tip for you, most of these characters tend to use blue shadows on the areas that are white, because it generally looks a lot more appealing than gray. Now, one thing you'll notice, for example, is that Tony here has a nice soft shape, not hard edges. So I can just come in here and take a soft brush and soften everything up. Bigger regions like this are going to be really soft, and tinier regions will be somewhat sharp. And another thing, basically, all of these mascots have is some epic rim light. And they've got that basically everywhere. And another little color tip for you is to use blue as your rim light on black surfaces. That tends to almost always look better than a white rim light. Now just a little highlight along that.
Wow. This is actually really helpful. It's fun. Let's continue.
Alright. Set my timer for
Some
29
soft shine on the
minutes.
vest to make it look like slick fabric, but a hard shine on the cane just because that's a much smoother surface. And finally, a shine on the hat, and then I'll use a little bit of line hatching to make that hat look like fabric. Now, after tweaking the lighting just a tad, I'm going to give our man just a subtle stroke around him and a little drop shadow to help him pop off the background. Now, I don't really love the bow tie text just because everything here looks so red, so let me grab just the text part, and I think I can size that up to cover roughly the same surface area as the original badge. Maybe even give that a stroke so that all these letters feel more like a solid unit. And now I'm going to take a cue from the original Pringles logo and make this text yellow with some subtle bevels on that. Then a black stroke around everything to help it match the illustration. And I want to go for kind of a 3D look, so I'm just going to extrude out these edges. Then a little shading and some extra shine to really make this all look gold. Then let's get that original text on here and the product type, potato chips. And speaking of chips, we need to actually show some on here. So what I'm thinking is these empty spots all around the can would be the perfect place to put them. Kind of like they're just raining down all around it. Let's give those some lighting and a touch of drop shadow to finish it off. And lastly, I want to add a little bit of movement to this scene with this cool little spiral pinwheel in the background. Well, it looks like we've gone from our simple little egghead to a top-tier showman ready to dazzle the chip world. Up next is Monster Energy.
I feel like that's
love this
actually
design
better.
already. It's simple, but it looks great. But if we did want to complicate things a bit, well, we've got these big claw marks right here. So the obvious choice seems to be to add in the monster that's making those claw marks. Now, if we just take a lesson from every horror movie ever, you never want to show too much of the monster. So I think I'll move the name up
Yep.
top and the claw marks down.
Death.
That way I can put some claws down in this area, kind of like they're actually in the process of making those slash marks. And the rest of the monster will be hidden. And of course, we'll need some actual fingers on here as well. Okay, so this looks pretty bad, but with some textures and lighting, I think I can get it to look decent. And you guys know how in literally every horror film, there's always that one character that leaves the group and goes straight to the place that guarantees their certain death, all the while thinking they're completely safe. Well, my friends, that is you without the private internet access VPN. You're out here surfing the web, thinking it's all right.
It's not
IP address. I can just go to my one private free from the scratches first. And I'm kind of wondering how it would be if I made this can look like rock. Then just come in here and select the logo, expand it a bit, and then we can fill that in with the same texture. And that'll create this really cool 3D effect, you know, kind of like there's a rock shell around the can and the monster's ripping through it to get to that drink inside, or something like that. And now I think I want to add some texture to these marks. Let me just fix that up so it's nice and green. And then I just want to come in here and make a nice gradient so that it starts out darker here at the top and gets brighter as we move towards the claws. I guess kind of like the core of the drink is emitting light. Now let's come in here and get some green light on these edges like it's being cast out from the inside of the can. We'll just go in here and add in some sharper corners just so all of this isn't so smooth. And I've actually decided to expand those edges and just make them a little thicker. And then come in with a rim light to really help build that contrast between the background. Now getting back to the claws, I've got these really cool bones, which I think should work perfectly as a base texture for these nails. Then I've got some tree bark for a linear, scratchy texture, and I'll finish it all off with a finely detailed grunge layer. And I'm thinking I want these nails to be like super rugged and cracked, with a nice variety of bigger cracks and smaller ones. I give those cracks a grayer color to make it look like they've been aged, and I'll come in here with some highlights. And this just really adds a ton of dimension to the claws and gives us some of that extra fine detail that we need. Finally, a touch of soft shading across this whole thing. Now as for the skin, check this out. I found this really cool little alligator head, which I think if I put it right here, I can warp the eyelid to fit right around the base of the claw, and that forms a really nice transition flat between all of our scaly part and the actual nail. I think I want this to be slightly less saturated, like maybe more of a gray tone, and then some pretty heavy shading on here. But then maybe some highlights along these ridges to help counteract that. So I just finished up the other two fingers in exactly the same way as the first, and now I'm going to bring in some fog to have something for those fingers to reach out from, make that green, and just fade it out at the bottom so that bright green doesn't draw too much attention away from the logo. I really want some nice glow around the edge of this logo, especially here around the claws. And of course that light will be cast onto the claws themselves, which will really help just ground them into the scene. And lastly, just a few particles coming up from the bottom, because that just always looks really cool. So I'm a little conflicted because half of me thinks this turned out really cool, but the other half thinks these claws look like they came from spiral wood. And now we've got your butter from another mother, Lanolegs. This brand has actually gone through several changes over the years. The original design had this full body shot of a Native American woman. The one after that was just her head, and in the end they got rid of her entirely. So now the brand is just kind of lackluster. I mean, it's not bad, it's just simple. So my mission is to bring back some life into all of this scenery. And I'll start by making this whole bottom part of the lake. Now I do like the way that these trees surround the water. I just want to extend that up through the foreground to show that the land wraps around the entire lake, which also helps us develop a little more depth in this scene. Now I'm thinking a nice big tree would look good right here on the left side. Maybe give that a bit of a branch hanging down. Yes, that is a branch. And once again, this is all just a base for an illustration I'm going to do for the entire thing. Now I probably don't want to stick a similar tree on the other side, just because that's way too symmetrical. So maybe I can go with a log instead. Get us a little moss growing on top of that bad boy. Now we do need something on this upper right side to balance it with the left side. I found this really cool little rock formation I can put right over here. Maybe a little vegetation going on top of that as well. Heck, maybe even a little bush right here between these. That's looking pretty good. But now, you know, I feel like this area over here is just too empty. So maybe a small rock somewhere down here. And heck, I'll even throw in a mushroom too. And that'll give Papa Smurf a place to live. Now let's curve this land back here a little more so we get a nice round lake. And to give this whole scene a bit of grandness, how about some mountains? And just slope those towards the horizon, stick those on both sides. And since we all know the Earth is actually flat, we'll need to connect these so the water doesn't run off the edge of the planet. Lastly, I'm going to add in some clouds in a circular fashion, which just point right towards the logo. You got it?
Did he just say the Earth is flat? Ah! Psych. I definitely wasn't.
I see the vision yet? Probably not, but just wait. So for the art style of this current illustration, they've used kind of a Quintillism style, but I want to go with something a little more interesting. I've always been a big fan fan of a show called Gravity Falls. I think the forest scenery in there is just incredible, so I want to do something similar with my illustration. After some quick sketching, I've got this. I'll just drop in some color, and I've got this beautiful little scene that uses a very similar color scheme as the original. Let me get the logo back in here, and I'll start painting the sun, which is going to be right behind the O in the logo. And now when it comes to painting the shadows, we know exactly where they should be because the direction of the light source is so pronounced. And notice I'm being pretty detailed on the shadows for the objects that are really close to us, but all the trees in the back won't have any, because that's one thing we can use to make them feel further back in the scene. Now I'll just darken up the edge of the sky to really bring some extra focus to that sun. Now how about a little light flare over top of those mountains, the trees back here, and then just some shading on all the objects up front. And I think lightening up these line colors will really help sell that light effect better. Darken up this water up front to match that lighting as well. And of course we need some nice reflections of these beautiful trees, along with those mountains, which I will blur and make pretty subtle. Let's get the butter text on here, and a smaller salted right underneath. And of course we can't forget about that net weight, which I'll give a black stroke just to help it stand out a bit. Then I just want to beef up the logo with a little stroke and a white outline to really help it stand out from that illustration. I think a little texture over everything will really bring out that nature vibe that we're going for. And lastly, I just want to bump up some of these colors to make this scene come to life. I don't know about you guys, but I am stoked with how this turned out. It's got all the charm of the original just cranked up a notch. You can watch me oversimplify famous package designs here, and be sure to subscribe so the monster...
Okay, how long was it? Well, since it's only been 11 minutes, we can watch that. Also, let's...
In this video, I'm simplifying
How
package
does that
designs
actually
for popular brands to see if minimalism is really what it's cracked up to be. Can we simplify logos, reduce color palettes, cut out text, and still end up with a better design? You will be the judge. Up first, we have Flaming Hot Cheetos. One bag of these and your fingers basically go to cheese. Honestly, Cheeto Cheetah is probably one of my favorite brand mascots of all time. But this back design, man, I mean, it's like everything, everywhere, all at once. Kind of the definition of when everything stands out, nothing does. So let's see if we can simplify all this and come up with something a little more focused. Let's go with a red background to help distinguish it from the orange bag of regular Cheetos. And this original logo has all sorts of effects and stuff on it, but I found this version which has nothing but flat colors, which I'll just stick right up here at the top. And here comes the first controversial change. I'm gonna make it white. Now this isn't just because I'm trying to simplify everything, but I really just want to try to avoid every single element being yellow or red like the original design. This white text just really pops off the package a lot better, but I still might give it a touch of drop shadow to help enhance that. Chester, unfortunately, won't be making an appearance on the new design, but I do still want to show off the actual Cheetos. I just don't need 6 of them. One will do just fine. And then a camera raw filter will help me cook up that texture and make it feel extra crunchy. Like the original package, I want to use fire to show that these Cheetos are hot, but this thing has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different flames. How many flames do you need? And look at these. They literally just made a fire shade, slapped a flaming texture on it, and didn't even care if the shades lined up at all. I mean, I guess that works. For my design though, I don't really want to go with a realistic fire, just because the overall brand feels more cartoony and illustrated to me. So I'll just go with a more flat flame like this. But you know, I do like the way they did this flat flame over here, where it actually casts a shadow onto the bag, almost like this is a paper fire or something. And a quick designer's PSA, if I ever catch any of you out there making shadows this hideous of a color, I will take away your design license. Why would you ever use black shadows on a yellow background? Just use orange. See how much nicer that looks? You don't have all those ugly green colors in there. Anyways, back to the fire. So all I did was stack up a few different flame layers, making each one more red the further back in the stack it was. To get that papery layered feeling, I made each one cast a subtle shadow onto the next. I finished up with some gradients and a small rim light along the edges, which just helps each layer feel like it has a bit of depth. Now even though this fire is supposed to be made of paper, I still think it would look really cool if it was casting out light like a real fire would. So I'm just going to darken up the bag right around the edges, leaving the area right around the fire still lit up. A little extra yellow right around here for some added intensity. And you know what I'd really like to do is make this entire thing feel like it's on one of those photography sets, you know, like the ones with the smooth little backdrops.
Just make it
and maybe
white
there's a spotlight
words.
shining down on everything. So let me just get that spotlight in here. We're just going to make this Cheeto cast a shadow on the ground. And we'll just adjust the lighting on the actual Cheeto. And lastly, a little rim light from the fire. And of course, our paper fire is going to be casting the
I
shadow
saw that
onto
in
that
the
back
shop.
wall. I think that's all working pretty
Never
good.
think
Now let's just
that
take care of the flaming hot logo,
Cheetos
which I'm going to stick right up
flaming
here. I just want to darken up the stroke and tone down those highlights. Then I'm just going to bend that so it matches the shape of the logo right above it. And that'll just help both of these things feel more like a single unit. Then we just pop in the net weight and the product description, and this packaging is done. I think this has a lot of the same energy the original has, but it's certainly much clearer and a lot more readable. Dawn is a name you've likely heard if you've ever washed your dishes, and the thing they're kind of known for is donating soap to help clean animals mucked up by oil spills in the ocean. Hence, the baby ducks. So first off, let's simplify this logo. It's got a lot of effects right now, but the overall structure is pretty good. So let me just grab a copy of that and do a little selection wizardry to get a solid white version of that text, which I think should stand out quite nicely on this blue bottle. Now I think I can just trace the shape of that original circle, and then make that dark blue so it stands out from the soap behind it, but it also won't compete too much with the logo text. And just nudge that down a bit so it's more centered. Basically, I've just inverted the original logo, but I think it looks nice. So I do like these little ducks over on the original, but in the pursuit of simplicity, one of them is going to be exterminated, and the other is going to get turned into a simple illustration. So we'll start off with the head of our little duck, then comes the body, a cute little beak,
Why did
a
you put
couple of
the
eyes,
baby
and I'll
one?
finish it off with a touch of shading. And we have
Kill the
Now, it's
mama.
interesting, this rim on the bottle kind of looks like a wave of water. So what if I messed out our little ducky to make it look like he's riding that wave? I like it. Suppose we should tell people this is dishwashing liquid, add in all that legal mumbo jumbo, and all this other text on the original package is just marketing fluff really, not really something a design minimalist needs. Finally, I'm just going to add some subtle gradients on the logo and on the duck, just so those images won't be overly flat. This new design definitely has that certain charm to it, and that cute little duck really hammers home the nature
I
part
like-
of Dawn's
okay, that
brand.
was
And
pretty
now we
good.
have Gatorade,
It's the way where I
probably
did
most
the
popular sports
Cheetos.
drink in the entire
The
world.
Cheetos.
But here's the thing.
The Cheetos one. What? If I even saw that store, I'd be like, is this supposed to be Cheetos? But no, it's not. Also, I hope you like what my face looks like. It's probably hard to see. There you go. Maybe I'll take the jelly.
I really don't like the packaging. I mean, do you guys? I think it's mainly just all the gray. Like, what's up with that? It just feels very Windows 95 or something. And on top of that, we've got a lightning bolt stamped into the bottle, another carved out of the label, and even one more right here on the logo. It's like, how many lightning bolts do we really need? Well, I guess my first step to simplifying all this is to just get rid of this big cutout in the label. And yes, getting this entire thing to look like a solid blank label was just as tedious as you might imagine. Now, instead of Tin Man grade, I'm going to go with black, which I think not only looks better against the colored drink, but it just feels more athletic to me, which is their target market. Now we can just get that logo on here, make it a bit bigger, and it honestly baffles me that Gatorade made their name so small on the original design. I mean, most companies want their logo as big as humanly possible, so I think a better idea is to stick it right here underneath the G, size it up to be the same width, and that should at least help people unfamiliar with the brand learn the name. Let's see, thirst quencher, I don't think we really need. The flavor though, well, that would look good right down here, in maybe some kind of slanted, athletic looking font, and of course we'll have that match the color of the drink. Get that legal text in right down here, and I'm just going to borrow this little guy, don't tell anyone, and stick him right over here. And lastly, I do actually think it's pretty cool to have something cut out of the label. I just think a much better spot to do that would be right here. See, if we cut out this little bolt, then that drink behind it will end up coloring it in, which I actually think is really cool because the lightning bolt is going to match the color of the Gatorade that you're drinking. Well, I gotta say, I really like this minimalistic design. The aesthetic,
Yeah.
the colors, the cutout are all
Yeah, that's actually a pretty good design. I like that. If I saw it, I would buy it. Well, that, yeah, I feel like the old design kind of was a little bit too complicated. Also, that design looks amazing.
much better in my opinion. And next up on the docket,
Yeah.
we have Orbit. Now with an even cleaner feeling, whatever that means. This package has so much going on. It's clear they like circles, which makes sense because the name is Orbit, but I'm not sure what's going on with all these patterns. And bro, who could even read this? It's just, I don't know. Well, let's at least go ahead and start off with the same green background, because that's actually quite a nice color. Then I'll just snag a copy of the logo and throw that into Illustrator. And I can come over here and image trace it, get rid of all these little extra parts, and we're left with a nice clean white version that we can add right in here. Just need to add that cutout back into the O, and we're good. Wait a second. These are not the same logos. The original has a much lower B stem, and then this I needs to be raised. Okay, now we are close enough. Let's put the Wrigley's logo right up here so it can be seen, instead of smushed down here in a size 4 font. I do actually like the idea of circles surrounding the O like they've got it here, but what if instead of all this, we just made them simple solid colors, kind of like this, radiating out from that central O, making those darker the further out they go, which ends up giving us this really cool little burst effect. I think a little shadow would be nice to help us separate these layers, but all this does make the text a bit hard to read, especially around this area. So I can just come in here with a soft brush and paint a lighter green color behind it to form a smoother background for the logo. A little shade over on this side, and I'll stick the flavor of the gum right down here, which happens to be artificially flavored. Who would have guessed? And as a small homage to all the patterns in this original package, maybe a little circle texture right up here in the corner to help fill in some of that space. This is definitely one of my favorite redesigns of the video so far. It's modern.
Actually, I had to pick this one or this one. I forgot about that part. I want to pick this one instead of that one. This looks way better. It looks old. But I do kind of like the design of this more than that. So I forgot about that. But yeah, it looks nice, but actually I'm kind of over it. I can't decide which one's better actually. But it doesn't matter.
Clean, and it still has a lot of character and movement through those simple elements. And last up we have Campbell's Tomato Soup. This is a super iconic brand, and there's even a famous painting done of it, which is worth the same as 6 Bugattis, by the way. Campbell's has actually redesigned their packaging several times since they started back in 1895 with the general trend of getting simpler each time, until they reached this. Now you might say this design is already super simple, which is correct, but to the true minimalist, even this is far too complex. We don't need this little gold seal or all these little frilly things. Heck, we may just make the can solid red and let the brand speak for itself. Okay, I'm not going to go that far, but I do think the red background would be a good jumping off point, upon which I can place the logo, maybe rotate it a bit so that these slanted letters are straight up and down, which also lets me make it bigger. That way the logo can be a central element to this design since it's so recognizable. Out of all the other elements in the original design, I feel like the tomato is probably the most necessary. So I'll just go tomato shopping here, and this little guy looks pretty nice. So I'll get him and then stick him right here at the bottom. And my idea here is to just kind of fade out this tomato, kind of like we're making the entire can feel like the tomato. Just need to adjust the levels a bit to help smooth out that blending, and perhaps a touch of darker red right behind it to help that top stand out.
Wow.
And of course people need to know this is tomato
Wow, you made that look like a tomato anyway. Just kidding, still.
soup, and I'll leave that pretty small just because the tomato is already a big visual indicator of what kind of soup this is, but I do want a font with a little more flair. And a bit of a pro tip here, spreading out the letters helps basically any font feel more fancy. Then the condensed text can go right down here, and I'll even make it gold to keep the original can's color scheme going. And we're left with a design that keeps a lot of the same visual traits as the original, but with more focus on the Campbell's logo and that big red tomato. And it looks like 70% of you are still not subscribed, so go subscribe if you want to see me make
Actually, we'll go on some videos. Actually, subscribe to my channel. Like, hit that. Just kidding, you don't have to if you want to. I'm just saying if you want to, sure. And last video, this one. It's only 12 minutes. Yeah, this video is gonna be 30 minutes. Just because of packing. Well, let's watch. I hope if you got to this far, you deserve a cookie. Come on, ask your mom or dad. Or by yourself. Sorry. I can't. I'm not rich enough, okay? I'm not like Mr. Beast who actually gave a bunch of his subscribers cookies. They give all of his subscribers cookies, but well, I'm gonna do a cool transformation. 3, 2, 1.
If you want to join a community, all connected by the same calling, you belong at Chamberlain University.
We're done.
What about these?
Oops.
Okay, let's just skip that.
The quicker picker upper. One sheet of Bounty is all you need, and
Wait.
Bounty is 2 times more absorbent, so you can.
Over the years,
Finally.
companies have spent millions of dollars turning wonderful logos full of character into this. Fantastic. But during that same time, video games have gone from pixel-pouncing plumbers to mind-blowing realistic experiences. So what would happen if designers were more like game makers? Well, today, I'm taking these 3 simple logos and turning their graphic settings to the extreme. Starting with, so what even is the Starbucks logo exactly? I mean, you'd think it's a mermaid, but it's got two tails. I don't know, maybe Ariel was just popping out of the water for some fresh sun, plastered with nuclear waste or something. I guess that would kind of explain the green water that she's soaking in. I mean, obviously, of course, apparently it's just a siren. Well, it seems sirens are like evil mermaids. Okay, and they're known for singing enchanting songs to lure sailors to their death. So what I gather is that basically we just need to make a mermaid with two tails. Since apparently sirens generally have two tails. Well, I have found this lovely lady for our base model, and we are going to make all her dreams come true by chopping off her legs and replacing them with fishtails. Okay, we would just quickly mask her out, and I'm leaving her a bit bigger than the original simply because every time Starbucks redesigns their logo, it seems like they get more and more and more zoomed in. First off, let's fix this hair situation because hers is way too short right now. And finally, I found this girl who I think has the perfect hair for what we're looking for. So we can just stick her in here, and then I just want to break her up so that both of their hairs align a little more closely. Now, removing the background is easy enough, but I'm a barber, and I don't want to spend all day cutting all this hair out from her body. So instead, I'm just going to leave the shoulders alone. I think they look pretty good as they are. Well, maybe I will smooth out this one little area. Then I can just fade out her body to blend that in with our original models. Just being careful to leave these organic shadows intact so I don't have to paint them by hand later. And then we just carefully remove her face. Blending in this hair is actually not that hard either. All you really have to do is make sure your seams fall along the places where the hair naturally has edges. Just like that. And then some shadows right here around the face to help unify everything. And now I dare say that you couldn't even tell that these were two different women stitched together. Ah, dang it. It looks like the hair model was wearing a shirt, and you can still see part of that right down here. But maybe I can get rid of that with the healing brush. Or maybe not. But I bet I can copy this part of the hair. Just sort of scooch that down and blend it together. Nice. Now it is possible you might have noticed a big gaping hole right around here. Well, according to the original logo, she's supposed to be... But we keep it family friendly here on YouTube, so... Alright, to make this more realistic, I want to have her underwater. Probably ought to remove some of these dots though, so it doesn't look like we're in outer space. But I don't really want to make her surrounded by green water like the original logo. However, I do want some kind of green in here, just because that color is really iconic to the Starbucks brand. So I'm thinking we crack open the hair dye. Now, turning her hair green isn't really that hard. It's really just a simple hue saturation adjustment layer. Not turning the rest of her body green, well, that's a little more tricky. Obviously, we just want to mask out that effect from her skin, which along these edges, you know, is not really that bad. It's in these areas, though, that you start to question why you're trying to even do this at all. I mean, because you're not going to try to come in here and paint each individual little hair. Well, I mean, I guess you could do that, but I'm not going to. So instead, I'll just settle on using a soft brush, give it a subtle color fade until it looks good enough. And now maybe just a few extra highlights to really make this stuff pop. Oh, and how about some green eyes to match that hair too? Now let's turn this full popper into a fool. At least I assume that's why she's wearing a green. Basically, I found this little guy, which should work as a base. Just need to cut off the bottom section. Oh, and it looks like lightning has struck twice because I found this really cool little starfish ornament that should work perfectly for that central star she's supposed to have. And just a slight adjustment to those colors to make sure everything matches. But I'm afraid that's where the similarities to the original are going to end, because I really just don't want to have to come in here and bend these little points to try to match the exact shape of this crown. So instead, I'll just leave it as it is. But I am going to bring in some seashells to make this crown feel more ocean themed. All I have to do really is make them look gold, which surprisingly isn't too hard. First off, I just need to adjust the hue, turn down the brightness, and one thing about gold is that it generally has these really rich dark areas. So I'm going to use a color
Look at the
burn
picture
layer
that
to
showed
add
up
some
on my
darkness
feed
in it.
just
And then
now.
blend it can take that away from
My
the areas
handsome
that were
man.
already highlighted. Another add layer will help me boost those highlights even further. And now that looks like a gold shell if I've ever seen it.
SeaWorld.
I did that exact same process with another shell on this side, and I even added in some starfish too. Painting all the shadows that would be cast by these new items was the final touch needed to make this whole thing feel like a solid unit. Now let's go ahead and mask out this part of the crown so it looks like the hair is in front of it, and just a touch of shadow right under here. And to match the crown, I feel like her top can be golden too. And now we can move on to these tails. Honestly, I'm thinking we just find a fish somewhere to use. We do want those scales to appear decently large though, but if we get a really tiny fish like this little guy, we can just scale him up, and that should give us the exact size we're looking for. We just pop that other one right over here. I think I will get rid of these large shines though, because it just looks a little too slimy to me. Then just some simple lighting to finish it off. Now in the original Starbucks logo, it has her tails directly out to her sides, which I think is just kind of an awkward position. So instead, I want her tails to actually appear behind her. So to do that, I'm going to add in a focus blur that gets stronger the further it goes back. And then I'll paint some blue on these so it looks like they're fading out into the water. And I can do a similar thing to the crown as well. And I feel like if she truly is underwater, there's no way her hair is going to be this perfect. So I'm going to borrow a couple of other ladies who add some more hair behind her, kind of like it's flowing up and down in the water. And after some minor lighting tweaks, our beautiful Starbucks logo is done.
Wow.
Believe it or not, Jurassic Park was the first movie I ever saw in theaters, and I had literally just been born. So I want to make sure to do this iconic logo justice. So I guess I'll just start with the main circle first. It looks like the real logo isn't even actually a perfect circle, but mine will be. Just duplicate that and size it down, use that as a mask, and we've got our ring. I think that would look really cool if it was made out of stone. Stretching that all the way down and lightening it up just a bit. Then a small shadow to add some depth. We can add in that smaller ring on the outside with a touch of highlight. Now for the block where this title is supposed to be, I like that to be made out of wood. Kind of like we're sticking to the theme of the stone and wood gate in the movie. I just need to adjust it a bit so it's more of a rectangular shape. Then I'll just come in here and add a sharp shadow right underneath to add a sense of depth. And the same thing with the highlight too. Can't forget these little bits on the edges. I do feel like this particular board is just a little too smooth.
all over the
So
floor
I'm gonna add a
already?
second plank of wood and use that just for the texture. And now for the text. What I like to do
Oh, wait,
is
that's
make it look like these letters were hand carved out of the wood. And I have found this super cool sign which has just the look I'm going for. I just need to get rid of these letters first. And then I can drop it right in here as a texture for the letters. Just expand that to fill the entire thing and then darken it up so we can actually read it. Now to make this look 3D, adding in a little edge bevel does a pretty good job. And for even more depth, an inner shadow will make it feel like these carvings are deep down in this wood. It just needs a little touch up here around the edges. And lastly, just some subtle lighting on this text to help bring out that texture. Now unlike the original logo, where the dinosaur bones seem to be possessed and they're just strolling through a miniature jungle, my dinosaur is going to be found exactly where he belongs. In the dirt. He's kind of cute, isn't he, though? I think I'll call him Carl. Let's just mold Carl to roughly line up with the original logo. Just bend his spine right around like this. And now the main problem is that Carl's arms just don't quite line up with the original. And I'm hoping he doesn't mind if I just cut them off and scooch them right up here. And unless you're Dr. Grant, I really don't think anyone's going to notice. And I do want to darken him up to help him stand out from the dirt, as well as to better match the original silhouette logo. We can just start giving him a nice drop shadow, along with some nice lighting on the bones. And now one thing that is kind of bothersome is that all these little tiny bones tend to run together visually, but if we add some highlights to some of these larger features, it kind of just helps break things up so you can focus on these different parts separately. You know, I actually feel like the dirt is way too smooth right now, but adding in some tiny rocks should give this face some really nice detail. Heck, we can even add in some cracks here for a little bit more grit. I went around and masked out parts of the ring to make it look like these rocks were in front of it, which adds to the feeling of depth. And then a nice shadow on the ground and along the inner wall helps tie them together. Now, if we assume these bones were found in the jungle, there's got to be something growing in here, right? So we'll just select all the green bits, and then we can just paint out the areas where we don't want any of this vegetation to show up. And speaking of plants, I want to keep the same idea of using some type of plant life down here at the bottom, like the original logo, but my plants are going to be just a tad bigger. This is looking really cool now, but I can't help but thinking that it feels a little too clean. So how about we darken the ring up and then add in some cracks to the stone? You can actually cut away part of this ring too to make it feel like these pieces have fallen out. One more there, a big one down here. And then a highlight across this whole thing should really help those broken edges stand out. And since this is a jungle, maybe we can even bring in some vines here that's growing on the rock.
That
And then
smells
one more
good.
guy right over here. And a small little green one to top it all off. I think a touch of moss is the last thing this stone needs to complete its run-down age look. And now for one last touch of terror, the giant claw mark ripping through the sun.
Okay.
And with that, our Jurassic Park logo is complete. The whole
Okay. I got it. Starbucks. Fine. Just kidding. 8 out of 10.
Well, yeah, it is.
10 out of 10. Yeah, I gave it 10 out of 10. It's awesome.
Gotta get it pulled off quick.
Hit the last logo. If you missed my last video, I started an absolutely insane display.
Hope I didn't overcook it.
And last but not least, we
Car.
have Tesla. The brand of choice if you want to drive your car way off
Car.
This is certainly the simplest logo in the set, and I have an equally simple idea for it. Tesla makes cars, so let's let's make this look like a car. Obviously, I'm not going to warp this into the shape of the sedan, but the idea is to just mimic the materials of a car. So I guess these two pieces will just be car panels, and I'm going to fill in this empty space with chrome. And to make it really feel like a car, a headlight. And I mean, that's basically it. But now, all I need to do is some painting, really just rounding off the shapes. Now, normally, these seams between car panels tend to be pretty dark, so if we want a thin, dark edge right between here, well, we're not going to paint it by hand. Instead, we can just select the base logo, contract that selection by a few pixels, and then we can paint perfectly straight black lines. And using that same technique, I can make these nice highlights around the edges as well. And then just fading those out along the edges to form a nice gradient. And then I'd like a hard seam, well, more of a bend really, right down the middle panel here. Give that a touch of blur, fade it out on the ends, and just a touch of yellow here on these highlights to help them pop out. Now to start making this look like car paint, we need a big shine right down the side. Then fading that out just like this. Now put a little bounce light right around the edges here, because the more reflections we have, the shinier this thing is going to look. And it wouldn't be a high-end car paint without some metal flakes. I actually don't know if Tesla uses metal flakes in their car paint, but I think it looks cool, so here we go. And a little light in here there just to punch things up, and that part is pretty much done. Now rendering out realistic chrome is actually a lot simpler than you think. It's really just all about the layering. Take this rectangle, for example. You start with a dark bottom and a light streak right at the top. It already starts to look like it's made of metal. But if you add some bounce lighting under here, maybe a layer of transition, and even a secondary highlight at the top, you start to get something that looks pretty convincing when you zoom in, which are the exact same steps I did to get this right here. Then I can just come in and add some gradients to this to create some different transitions. Now, I probably could spend a bunch of time trying to make a custom headline for this, but I think it would just end up solid white anyways, especially if the light is on. So instead, I'm just going to take the lazy man's way out and just add some blue with a light flare for a little cool factor. And as a finishing touch, I like to bring in the fact that Tesla makes electric cars by adding in this really cool little electric shock that comes out of the core and wraps around the entire structure. And after a couple final tweaks, this is our redesigned.
Ooh. Yeah. 7 out of 10. It's just 7 out of 10. 7 out of 10. It looks like I just did 17.
Logo for Tesla, which honestly ended up just looking like Iron Man. But please subscribe so Carl doesn't have to keep crying himself to sleep every night.
Well, I hope you liked the video. Click the bell button. Just kidding, you don't have to. Bye. I don't know why I'm doing this. I'm just.